Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. So when I told you this idea, let's talk about some old cartridges, you just started off with some of the old stuff. And, you know, a lot of the cartridges people know about, they don't know that they're that old. The first one that comes to mind is just a good old 30-06, 1906 it came into being.
Well, after you talked to me about this, I started thinking about it. And you're right, 30-06, it's one of the three most obvious ones that I can think of. And there are 300-plus-year-old cartridges that if you can buy guns for them today, you can buy ammunition for them today, and if you had them, you could hunt everything on the planet.
All right, go for it. I like this.
22 long rifle, 1887.
Huh.
30-06, 1906.
Right.
And the 375 H&H Magnum, which came out in 1912.
Right.
Pretty much from mouse to elephant.
From mouse to elephant, you got it there. Now, you told me, was it a year ago or so that you took your Swedish sniper rifle hunting? Tell me about that.
I did. A 6.5 by 55 Swedish Mauser, which came out in 1894. And I have an original Swedish sniper rifle that the rifle was built in 1910. And the scope is World War II era. It's 1942. Mm-hmm. And when I bought it, I went and shot it, and it turned out to be so accurate. I said, I need to go shoot a deer with this thing. And I shot one 246 yards. So not bad for an antique.
Was the rifle made in 1919?
No, 1910.
1910. Holy cow.
Yes.
And the 6.5 by 55 cartridge is older than that.
It came out, I think it was designed in 1891, and start of production was 1894.
Very much like the 7 by 57 Mauser, which really kind of was the granddaddy of them all.
Actually, it predates the 7 by 57 Mauser by a year.
Oh, I'll be darned. Huh.
But, I mean, the Mauser cartridges are kind of the granddaddies of a lot of the stuff out there.
Well, when you think about it, Paul Mauser was a kind of a little bit earlier than John Browning, but still in that level of genius, wasn't he?
Certainly from the rifle standpoint, but Browning designed pistols, machine guns. I mean, he designed stuff far more than rifles. I mean, shotguns.
Yeah.
He did pretty much everything.
And the weird part to me was he did it often without even drawing anything on a piece of paper. He would just sit there and think about it, how all the parts would go together in this mechanism, and then start making the parts himself. And when he was done, he had a gun that would function.
Yeah. Well, some people can do that. I don't know that I'm one of those guys, but
pretty incredible.
Certainly, yeah, he did some incredible things.
All right, do a comparison. I know you've done this a good bit. A lot of people don't know. They may have heard of or even know that it exists, but they don't know anything about the 6.5 by 55 Swedish cartridge. You have been a fan of that cartridge for a long time. And now, of course, everybody knows about the 6.5 Creedmoor, and there are some things about it that are cool and some advances. But you might do a comparison between the two. And why do you like the Swede?
Well, the main thing is I'm a hand loader. Okay, the Swede has a lot more history. It's 113 years older than the Creedmoor.
Okay.
And it's also a bigger cartridge. I guess one of the drawbacks is that it requires a long action, whereas the Creedmoor goes into a short action.
Okay.
But the factory ballistics are quite similar. But because a Creedmoor is actually 47 millimeters long, whereas this Mauser is 55 millimeters long, so you have more case capacity. So if you're a hand loader and you load it to modern pressures, you get a little bit more oomph. And on top of that, I just like the nostalgia.
Yeah, you do. You like those old guys. I mean, not that you don't use the modern ones. I know you use the 7mm Somme. That's kind of one of your go-to rifles for deer hunting.
I do. Well, it's really funny because my first 6.5 Swedish Mauser was actually a custom rifle built on a Ruger 77 action. And I didn't buy a what you would consider a traditional Swedish Mauser military rifle until probably 2 decades after I started shooting the cartridge.
Interesting. All right, so I'm going to switch on you a little bit. One of the things we get with the more modern cartridges, the Creedmoors, et cetera, the PRCs, is the faster twist rate, which lets us use bullets with higher ballistic coefficients, longer bullets, if you will. And you being a long-time long-range shooter competitor, you have schooled me many times on don't discount the value of less wind drift. You want to go into that for a second?
Well, nowadays we have laser rangefinders, so I can literally tell you to the yard how far something is. And if I have a ballistic table, I can tell you how much, and I know my gun is zeroed in, I can tell you how much elevation to add. And that is, it takes all the guesswork out of it.
Okay.
But the big difficulty in long-range shooting is to be able to read the wind. And long-range game shooting, to be able to read it to such an extent that you can put the first round, your first round is correct. And a high ballistic coefficient bullet doesn't drift as much in the wind, so you have a little bit fudge factor.
Yeah, you got some margin.
It makes it a little easier to make the first round hit. And that's what people have been really concentrating on in the last probably 10 or 15 years.
And the difference is not insignificant. You get a nice 15, 20 mile an hour crosswind and shooting at 600 yards and more, you could be looking at a difference of a foot or more in wind drift, couldn't you?
No, it's not just that. Imagine you've got a steady wind and it is going from, say, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, okay? And it's variable. And, you might be able to read it within an exact mile an hour, which is, you can't, to be honest with you. But changing the aspect slightly like that will change the amount of wind drift from 1/3 to 2/3 of what we would call full value, which would be, 90%.
90 degrees, crosswind,
90 degrees. And so just those kind of changes will result in your bullet having horizontal disbursement. And the less those changes affect your bullet, the better off you are.
And that's one of those. And the other thing is, if the wind is changing, it's gusting, it's maybe going from 10 to 15 or 10 to 20 back and forth. And you really can't read that. You can't tell what it's doing the moment you press the trigger. If your bullet has less wind drift, you're going to have less dispersion.
Yes. And you got to take into account the fact that the wind you're feeling here may be vastly different from the wind 300 yards downrange, 600 yards downrange.
I just talked to a guy who had that happen. He was where he was shooting. There was no wind, and he shot, and fortunately the wind was drifting the right way, and he actually hit this deer in the neck. He said if it had been going the other way, he would have gut shot him. He stood up, and all of a sudden the wind's basically blowing his hat off. He had no idea it was blowing that much across this big valley.
Yeah. And shooting across a valley is going to be a mystery because if you're shooting basically not, across a valley where there's no indicators, like there's no grass blowing, there's no trees, or there's nothing. It's just atmosphere out there.
Yeah, you can't see which way it's blowing or what it's doing. Exactly right. So, if you were going to be picking up, and I'm going to finish you up with this one. If you're going to be picking a rifle cartridge today for deer, elk, whatever, are you going old school, or are you going to take advantage of some of the new ones? And if so, what would be like 2 or 3 of the ones you'd be looking at today?
I don't know. It would depend on my mood, but of the cartridges that I've seen come out lately, the new 7mm PRC looks like just an awesome game cartridge.
It does.
It really does. It has all of the best part of the 7mm Magnum. and the best part of the new designs with the faster twist and longer necks that keep the base of your bullet out of your powder column. So it really kind of has a lot going for it with enough power. I mean, it's a step up from the short action Ultra Mag I'm shooting right now, which is a super accurate cartridge and nothing to sneeze at. But I like a little extra juice if I can get it.
Of course you do. Of course you do. Why not? Dan, I appreciate it. I knew that you would get into this whole idea of let's talk about old cartridges and compare to the new ones. And you know, for those who don't know, I guess the point would be if you stumble across a 7x57 or 6x55, 6.555, don't be afraid of it because those cartridges are good. And a lot of times you can steal those rifles.
Yes, you can, except for people that know about them.
Like you. Dan Zelenka, thank you. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, you take care. All righty.